All right, welcome everybody to the Sentinels of Liberty podcast. I am your host, Redbeard, and I thank you for joining me this evening, where we always lead with liberty and we are uncompromising in our principles. So tonight, I was planning to do the conversation, as it were, about do countries have a right to exist? Um, Unfortunately, I've shifted away from that for now in order to address a few things as it pertains to Iran. If you're getting sick and tired of hearing of Iran, I am too. I wish it's something that would clear up quickly, but unfortunately, I think we may be in for a longer haul than most people would like, which is quite an unfortunate circumstance. But we're here. We're going to be talking about that. We're also going to talk about a few things as it pertains to some domestic things, the firing and letting go of certain individuals. So just strap in, buckle up. We're going to cover a fair few things here now. If you'll just give me just a moment, I'm going to pull up the first article here that I have. If I can find. Oh, well, I guess I don't have it, but that it happens every once in a while. But anyways, we're going to continue going. To start with the Iran war situation, on Friday, I believe it was yesterday, we had lost or had damaged several aircraft. Now, this is in a seemingly growing list of airframes that have been either hit or damaged or completely downed or whatever the case is, as it pertains to the war with Iran. Now, I know that there was a few airframes that were hit that supposedly were considered friendly fire in the onset of this whole thing. That is left up to speculation by many. And I do have questions myself about that. But the recent ones was a F-15E Strike Eagle, as it were, a reported shot down over Iran. One crew member was rescued. However, the other crew member is uh, still considered missing, unaccounted for, and there is a search that is going on by both, I would assume, the United States and Iran. Now, what's interesting about this is there is, after this whole thing occurred, you had a situation where a CSAR was commenced, which is a combat search and rescue, and you had several airframes go out. There was a fueling tanker along with, I believe it was two, I've seen different reports on this. I believe it was two Black Hawk style helicopters. However, I've seen conflicting reports between the Blackhawks and a let's see here in my notes, a HH-60 Pavehawk helicopter, which I believe I could be wrong, but I believe they're part of the same family of helicopters, but they're stylistically slightly different. But either way, we have a situation where airframes were both in direct contact, and we have a situation where some were downed. One of the other aircraft that went down was an A-10, and the particular A-10 was an A-10 Thunderbolt 2, at least from what I've been able to gather. It didn't, however, go down in Iran. It was hit by Iranian fire. The pilot, from everything I've been able to try and figure out and gather, made it out of Iranian airspace, but ultimately ejected kind of in and around like the Kuwaiti airspace, from what I was able to kind of put together here. Um, the So with the A-10, it's being somewhat described as it was damaged and hit, but then eventually it was obviously a loss. So I think this is interesting. You had one of the helicopters that I believe also was pretty badly damaged, and I believe the other one was able to get away. And from my understanding, um, the one helicopter, I've heard conflicting reports here about this as well, to where one of the helicopters went down and the crew was lost. But then I've also seen another report where the damaged helicopter was able to make it back. So I'm trying to continue to sift through this because I feel like we're getting kind of half the story, as we do with anything. But the point, I think, being with this is this whole thing is a disaster, and this disaster is continuing to get worse with each and every day that goes by. It seems like we're either losing more aircraft, we're seeing ships get hit, we're seeing installations still get hit. And there was just something that came out recently that I've been hearing, and I haven't been able to confirm this, but supposedly there's reports coming out of how the numbers for the casualties are now seeming to be much higher than was initially reported, in both wounded and dead. So if that's the case and the cost is exponentially higher, or even slightly higher than what the numbers are, this should raise a lot of questions as well. Now, I do kind of understand from the point of the people who are kind of, I guess, running the show. You don't necessarily want to let everybody know how many people you've lost or how many people have been injured. But at the same time, at some point, you have to have a sense of transparency so that people know what's going on. They know, or they at least have some type of a finger on the pulse of how this situation is going. And by all accounts, you continue having an administration that continues to say, well, you know, everything is fine. Iran is basically neutered. They have no capability. They have no nothing. As they say, the AD, or the air defense, is completely destroyed, yet we continue to see airframes get attacked and some of them get taken down. So there's, I think there's a lot of holes in here. And I think when we look shortly here at some of the decisions that are being made, especially as it pertains to command staff, and you look at some of the recent letting go or recent lettings go, I don't even know if that's the way you should probably say that, but letting go of people like Pam Bondi, and there's conversation about Gabbard and a handful of other people. It really begs the question, like, how bad are things really at this point? And I would tend to err on the side that things are not going that well. They're not going well in Iran. They're certainly not going well as it pertains to domestic issues. And I think when we zoom out and we evaluate all of these different things that are taking place now, and you're seeing people get caught in these lies, you see people get caught in these these talking points that they continue to drag out in front of us, the same talking points, maybe just on a different day. And they continue telling you everything is fine, we're winning, Iran is crushed. Like this stupid quote of by Bondi, who was just like, oh, like the Dow is up 50,000. It's like, lady, like, we're not even talking about the Dow at this point, right? Like, she said that when she was being questioned as it pertained to Epstein. It's like, nobody cares. Like, in the end of the day, we're asking you questions. We want these answers, and you're trying to deflect. And it seems like that is all this administration has done, is completely deflect in a way from any criticism whatsoever. And it really does give the sense that we have an administration that is not only just in a disastrous spiral, but is one that seemingly is attempting to clean house in some way of anybody that's going to have any type of dissenting or detracting opinion, which brings a whole host of its own issues. The Iran war, it's something that never should have taken place to begin with. I think a lot of people with any sense of rationale or reasoning could tell you on its face, not only is this whole war completely unconstitutional, it's illegal in many ways. And you even have Trump going so far as to say, oh, we'll hit essentially their energy infrastructure and in a variety of different forms of infrastructure. They just hit a bridge. And he says, oh, it's this whole situation of like, oh, well, it could transport, military, or it supports the military effort on behalf of Iran. Well, it doesn't make sense. How is it that Iran has a military effort if you say that you've crushed it, but also upon further analysis by many people close to those within the Defense Department or have insider knowledge, such as like Daniel Davis, McGregor, and Patrick Henningsen, and Larry Johnson, so many of these people that have more of an inside pulse on these things. A lot of these guys are saying, like, look, like if you go into our documents, if you look at our legal framework as it pertains to war, not even just talking about the simple fact of like international war or international policy or legality as it pertains to war. It's hard to kind of spit out, but if you look at these parameters, you see that a lot of people within our government are talking about the dual use. Well, when you take that away and you look at some of the infrastructure that they're either talking about hitting or they have been hitting, there's nothing overtly implying that these things are dual use. They're predominantly civilian infrastructure. They're predominantly feeding civilian infrastructure. So you have just this gross escalation into things that even by our own legal definition would be considered war crimes. You have Pete Hegseth that says no quarter, giving people no quarter, no chance to surrender whatsoever. That also is the type of verbiage that can be construed as like, okay, well, is there an intent to really not give them quarter? Because if that's the case, then you're also looking at parameters where it falls in the realm of war crimes, right? So you have this administration that is seemingly very flippant as it pertains to anything about war crimes. They seem to wave it away and then say, oh, we're not going to do that. But then, President Trump also has the breadth to do whatever he wants to do. So you have to beg the question, well, which one is it? And if it is the war crime route, then people need to be held responsible. All that aside, you're seeing this culmination again, just continuing to pile into this disaster. The fact that we've lost even one person over this war in Iran is absolutely reprehensible. It's repugnant in my mind, and it is an absolute disgrace as it pertains to the foundation of this country and the very intent that our founders had when they established the United States and the way that we are supposed to conduct our foreign policy, the way that we're supposed to deal with others, the way that we're even supposed to conduct ourselves as it pertains to war is seemingly doesn't matter. And it's interesting because I remember both times when Trump ran, and I'm not saying it's only a Trump thing, but look, he is the president right now, so he's going to get the scrutiny. Both times that Trump ran, he was sitting here absolutely just lauding out this idea of like, oh, I support the Constitution. You've never seen anybody more constitutional than me. And the problems initially started with the constitutionality of the administration when they said, you know what, I'm all for taking the guns first and due process later. That was one of the first things that he said. And from that point on, way back in his first term, I had mentioned that, it usually, it can imply that there could be a pattern here. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he misspoke, but my skepticism was way, way, way up high at that point because it's not something who fundamentally understands the Constitution would ever say. And now we look into this administration after many, many missteps, mishaps, and willful just like disregard of the Constitution in 2026. And we look at the way that he's just rampantly and flippantly conducted war when he's used aggression against different nations. And then we look at all of the lies and all of the bellicosity and all of the propaganda that's being dumped into this idea that essentially, we are the bright light and the saviors of the world. We are the strongest at this. We can't be beaten. These people are bad, so you have to hate these people. You can't even have an opinion that goes against the current administration or the current way of viewing things. It's all of this rhetoric that is just built up. And look, some might disagree with me, but I think we're seeing the real Trump here. I really do. Now, I think I think there is something also that some people had pointed out, and they've been noticing it little by little. I didn't happen to catch it, but supposedly there have been some sleuths out there that had watched um, pretty closely in the first several minutes of the speech that Trump gave just the other day. And they said that, he was starting to, he had slurred some of his speech. And, this is a pattern that I think some people have been pointing out. It's like, look, like there may be some mental degradation. There may be some degradation in President Trump. And look, I mean, if that's the case, and he is, even beyond just his general actions, and he is not mentally fit to lead this country, we can't drag this out, right? Like, this is not something that you just set by the wayside. If he can't do or perform his job in the way that he needs to do this job, and he is not mentally fit to do so, don't drag that out. Like, he needs to be replaced or removed or whatever the case is. And there needs to be a proper process that has taken place. But I highly doubt that that's going to be the case. I said the same thing about Biden back in the day. If Biden can't cognitively do things, if he's not coherent, if he's not able to be mentally efficient in the discharging of his duties, then he needs to be taken out. The idea that there is seemingly such a high threshold for this type of conduct or this type of situation to occur really does beg the question, is he more manipulative? Is he easier to manipulate? Are people stepping in and using the fact that he has potentially, and I say potentially or allegedly, a mental deficiency that's been getting worse as a way to try and kind of shove in some type of information or whatever the case is? I don't know. It is very possible also that we could just have a guy who really just, like I mentioned, I think we're seeing the true form of what President Trump really is and what he's always been. And I think we saw some of that in the very beginning in 2016 with some of the things that he did, especially for a guy who talked about so much being so pro Second Amendment. And then it was just like without a skipped beat, it was, like, yeah, I like taking the guns first and due process later. There's a lot of red flags that have been there for quite some time. And I think when we really step back at it and we evaluate the Iran war and we look at the loss, we look at the use of the intel, and especially when we look at the people that we have allowed to come into our country, visit our sacred institutions and in our buildings, our government buildings, and have the ability to have the influence that they have. I mean, it's an absolute disaster. There's nothing America first about this. There is nothing that is supporting the people of the United States about this. And furthermore, I know there's a lot of people that also have taken the point in the side to where if, it's like, oh, well, if we're in it already, regardless of what you think about this, that we need to support the military personnel, regardless of what the situation is. Yeah, to some degree. Yeah, I 100% agree with you on there, but not to the degree that you think. The best way that we can support the military personnel is by not getting them involved in illegitimate, unconstitutional wars. And furthermore, taking them out of said unconstitutional and illegitimate wars so no more people have to die over the stupidity of this administration and their handlers. I mean, it's only going to get more disastrous, I feel, the longer the Iran war continues to drag on. I think we're going to see a lot more disastrous effects as it pertains to domestic policy. And one of the things that I think have become very much in the spotlight in question is, if I can find my article here. So this one is by Sonar 21. If I can pull this up properly. Here it is. It is the purging of individuals recently. Is Trump purging generals opposed to ground war in Iran, or is it something bigger? Now, I had brought up, I believe it was the other day, how I think that there is, I was commenting on Bondi's departure. Um, I think this administration is looking at these individuals as liabilities, and not liabilities necessarily in the fact that they're not capable individuals, but liabilities in the fact that they're not fully towing the line. They're not fully just adhering to everything that's coming out of the administration, and they're just not doing what they're told to do. Which, look, in the end of the day, I think if you're going to have a good realm of leadership, you need to have the debates and you need to have the conversation. But from what I've heard, you can't even really question anything as it pertains to, well, why isn't Israel committing ground troops to Iran? Why isn't Israel getting more involved? Well, Israel right now is currently tied up in Lebanon. They launched a ground campaign in Lebanon shortly after they started the war with Iran. So, and from my understanding, as I've heard it and I've become to understand it, is these are the types of questions that you can't really ask. And I believe I could be wrong here, but I believe it was on. I think it might have been on Daniel Davis's podcast, Daniel Davis Deep Dive. I think it was the episode he had Joe Kent on, but I believe Joe Kent brought that up too, to the point to where it's like you're not even allowed to ask these questions. You're not even allowed to bring up, why isn't Israel taking a bigger part of this? And to me, that really is not a good look. And then, so if you're not even and it's not just that situation, right? The whole Charlie Kirk thing, the fact that they're trying to avoid anything to do with Epstein. We haven't heard anything about, we haven't heard anything really further as it pertains to Crooks. We are sitting in a realm right now to where burying it and having it avoid the light of day is more of the disposition that this administration seemingly is taking. And when you have anybody that provides a dissenting point of view, or even just a difference of view, they seemingly are lambasted. They're shoved outside of the inner circle to where they can't be involved. They can't hear. They can't do anything. So they're essentially left deaf, dumb, and blind. I mean, and it's not just, fledglings. It's not just the lower people. I mean, you're talking about people like Gabbard, like Kent, like some of these critical individuals within the apparatus of this administration. And it really does beg the question, like, what the heck is going on? So it seems like we're just following disaster after disaster after disaster. And what that's all going to look like, your guess is every bit as good as mine. I wish that I had some type of way of being able to see into the future, but I really don't. But it doesn't spell anything good. And it's very concerning to me that we continue to see this type of behavior, especially as it pertains to not just foreign issues. We've seen Trump talk about Cuba. We've seen him go back to Greenland. They haven't mentioned anything about that within the last week, but they had brought it up recently. And, so it really begs the question, like, what is going to happen? You now have Trump also that's being very bellicose. And look, I'm not even saying I actually disagree with this one about leaving NATO. But he's sitting there and he's lambasting all the European countries that supposedly, we were buddy with. And, and these countries are just like, yeah, we don't want to be a part of your war. So there's so much going on. There's almost way too much going on than I would like. It makes it a lot to have to read and watch. But let's get into this article here, and I will stop rambling. So it becomes one of those things to where when you look at some of these guys, General Randy A. George, David M. Hodney, Major General William Bill Green Jr. These are some pretty up there guys. They tend to know a thing or two, given their career, and you would think that these are guys that you would want to kind of keep in the inner circle. These are the kind of guys that really seem to really have a grasp on some sensibility about certain things. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case with every person who wears any type of like high-ranking insignia or whatever the case is, but it seems at least that these people may have had an actual idea of what was going on. Now, that being said, some of these individuals also, I don't think were overwhelmingly anti-war, but it is interesting to see that these three in particular were let go. Now, as we go back up here real quick, I want to add some light. So let's see here. So this is one thing that I think is really interesting. And this is what I've been seeing a lot of. The forced resignation. So if these guys did not resign on their own and they were forced out, I think it's pretty interesting to kind of sit back and evaluate that. Why were they forced out? Now, some of the popular talk that I've seen so far has been because there is a difference of personality, perhaps maybe a slight difference of opinion or methodology or whatever the case is. Typically, you would think that if you're going to have a cohesive or well put together command staff, that you would have a situation to where you don't necessarily have competing ideas in the way of defeatism, but you have competing ideas so you can have a good fleshed out plan. These guys were, I guess, forcefully told to resign. And look, there's a lot that kind of leans into the idea that it was because they were going against what the administration had kind of in the way of the Iran war. Now, I did see a blurb. I don't know if there's any truth to this, but it was seemingly that one of the guys who had left or was forced to resign, I should say, basically said, look, this isn't good. You're being led by a madman. That's not overwhelmingly positive. But again, I can't verify that that's what was said. So I think it's interesting that these three guys in general were let go. Why are you going through and you're doing these purges, especially these three during wartime? There's got to be a pretty good reason, one would think, but at the same time, if they were going against what the administration wanted, then one has to question who's going to be next. Where are the next set of purges going to come from? Why is it that if that was the case to where they were let go due to a difference of opinion, then what does that mean moving down the road in terms of being able to question the administration? What does that mean for us even? Because if they're going to essentially start kicking out people within their own ranks for having a difference of opinion, what does that mean for us? What does that look like down the road? So now as we continue to go down the article, there was another point that I think was really interesting that I believe this was by, I believe this original article was by Larry Johnson. Yeah, it was by Larry Johnson. Larry goes on to say, as we go down here, the shakeup in the Trump administration is not confined to the military. Now, I think that's one thing that we've seen where Bongino, I guess, left. Perhaps he did leave. Perhaps he was told you need to leave. But Bongino left. But you also have the firing recently of Attorney General Pam Bondi. And you also have the potential from discussions that are underway for the departure of the DNI Tulsi Gabbard, FBI Director Kash Patel, which, I mean, if we're being honest, that wouldn't really be a loss, if we're being completely honest. You have Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll, Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer, from the Trump administration. So what in the world is going on? And I feel like, just bear with me here, I feel like we have a situation here to where the Trump administration currently, as it sits right now, is in a I feel like there's chaos, because I feel like there was this seemingly grand plan, or there was this big idea of how things were going to be, how things ought to be, et cetera, et cetera. And now the entire situation is just in complete turmoil, right? Especially when it comes to the Iran war. You had President Trump saying like, oh, it's not going to be a big deal. We're going to go in there. We're going to clean house. It's going to be fine. I think he was fully expecting that all of the people in Iran, for whatever reason, were just going to rise up and take over everything after a little bit of bombing here and there. And when it didn't happen, you just continued to see the same parroted line. Oh, they're all destroyed. All of this stuff is destroyed. We're winning. They're losing. All of this is destroyed. Meanwhile, while saying they don't have the capability, we're still having bases attacked. Tel Aviv is still getting bombarded. You still have situations to where we're losing aircraft. We're still getting some of our own personnel, reports of our own personnel that are still getting wounded, potentially killed, right, due to sustained injuries and severe injuries. So this is a situation to where it's spiraled out of control. And in conjunction with that, you've had these multiple, red lines, or these deadlines, if you will, to where Trump has been going through and he's been saying, hey, I'm giving you 48 hours. Well, the first one came and went, and then he's like, I'm giving you a couple weeks, and then you're going to see the couple weeks come and go, and then you're going to set another deadline. And in the end of the day, I do tend to agree that I don't think we're going to see a de-escalation here. I think there's chaos in the administration here domestically. I think there's a lot of chaos happening in general domestically. I did point out that I thought it was pretty interesting. You're seeing a pretty hefty push on the centering of speech, but also the attempts to start going after Second Amendment rights. But I think what you're also seeing is there's a lot of chaos and turmoil as it pertains to the situation in Iran. This whole thing is a disaster. This whole first year has been nothing short of just an unimaginable disaster, whether it's war, general domestic policy, Epstein, you name it. They have been on the losing side of all of this stuff, and it's not looking good. Now, what does that mean for the next 3 years? Well, if we try to put any patterns together, it's not looking bright, but we have an opportunity. Hopefully, people will start to see that there's an opportunity. If you can't change anything potentially in the federal spectrum, hopefully we can start to see some change in the states. And, hopefully we can start to, if you have a good state that's bolstered and that's fending off a lot of the insanity, hopefully you can keep that going. For the states that are dealing with insanity, whether it is, you have things like riots, or if you have things like illegal immigration, or whatever the case is, or hot button topics, gun issues, free speech issues, hopefully you can start to bolster and set up an amicable defense pertaining to those topics, right? So there's a lot of things that we can do at the state level and at the local level, that if we can't do something federally, we can at least try to have a bulwark set up there. But it is, man, I feel like there's always been a certain level of predictability with this stuff, but I can't even begin to tell you where I think this is going to end up. I think we're going to have troops on the ground in Iran. I really do. And I think it's going to be a lot more catastrophic than a lot of people initially realize. So I'm going to go through some comments here. This is going to be kind of a quick one tonight, but I felt that it was fairly important to just kind of go back and review some of the things that happened recently, because there's a lot going on. And with the downed aircraft, with Pam Bondi being let go, with the potential conversations that are being had about letting other people go, it is really becoming just just a chaotic mess, and we got to stay on top of the stuff, because unfortunately, whether we want it or not, it does affect our lives in some way. We're seeing much higher gas prices at the pump. We're going to see much higher prices, I would imagine, in the supermarkets and in the stores, and because everything has an inherent cost, right? So it's going to be, we're going to have to buckle up on this. So let's get to some of the comments here. Thank you, everybody who has been coming in and watching the show and supporting the show. Chevy, good evening. Wish the snow would stop. Yeah. Well, that's unfortunately it's kind of where we live. But I love it. Some people don't like snow, but man, I understand. Some people want to get the spring. So thanks for the comment there. I heard that between wounded and dead, it is now up to 13 T4, 1,000. I'm not sure what number you're trying to say. I know for the Iranian side, it's pretty high. It's well over 1,000 people have been killed in the Iranian side. I've seen reports for the U.S. side where the wounded has been somewhere between 300 to 500, with the dead being still somehow like around 13. That number hasn't moved, which I think is where you're getting some of the questions about, or at least some of the whispers and the murmurs that the actual counts are much higher than they're letting on. And I feel fairly inclined to be agreeable to that point. But like I said, you're not going to see them release a lot of those points, I think, right away. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying like that. I think they're going to try and have some form of information control, as it were. So I think the casualties between dead and injured here for our side, I think is higher. But what the exact number is, we only have what we have estimates wise. I don't think it's good at all. So we don't 134 people for the wounded and dead. Okay, so you did mention that 134. So the wounded and dead, again, I'm not sure where that is. I'll put this up here real quick. I'm not sure where that is. I've heard, again, estimates of like that, that 300 to 500 wounded for the U.S. And then you obviously have the number for the dead sitting somewhere around like 13. But I suspect that there's probably, the numbers are probably higher than that. And then David had another comment here. We don't need another Biden. We need a president that can actually think and act in a leadership manner. Yeah, I mean, look, I think you need somebody that's going to shoot it straight, right? But I'll be the first to say it. This is why you can't have older guys, right? Like you can make the argument of experience. You can do this, but I mean, we need to get somebody that's at least down into like the 40s and 50s, at least. Like middle of the road. They still have a lot of life left in them. There's no like overwhelming, inherent issues. Somebody that's going to be a capable, mindful, leader moving forward, that's going to be able to make decisions, and somebody that hopefully has the moral and principle fortitude to be able to make those decisions through their own ability and autonomy, versus being kind of a cuck or a slave to somebody else. So let's see. BCP, I'm not for the Iran interaction, but Trump has 60, 90 days to withdraw without congressional approval. That is not right, actually. The War Powers Act still requires approval. I've gone over this before. The War Powers Act, it does not give the president carte blanche to just wage war without any form of approval. Matter of fact, there's certain parameters within the War Powers Act that actually make it to where he's not able to do that. But I've gone through that, and I will post something down below. I'll throw something in the comments, kind of elaborating on that. But I have talked about the War Powers Act, and that's that's not overwhelmingly the way that functions. It's one of the very quoted, very used things, and I think a lot of people have a grave misunderstanding of how War Powers is actually fundamentally done. He does not have carte blanche to do that. But that's not. I think a lot of people's. I don't think that's really the mistake on most people's understanding of it. I think that's just the commonly peddled item that became very popular through obfuscation and using whatever position that they wanted to justify whatever actions they have. Again, I will have something put out in the comments below that kind of elaborates on this more. Yeah, he does not have carte blanche to just do whatever he wants. I know that I know that's the common thinking, but that's not. Now, actually, give me 1 second here. I'll see if I can actually. I should still have some show notes. If you'll allow me to go through. This is because I kind of if I still have my show notes, because I want to be accurate about this, and I feel like that matters. Founder Stefan. Got me digging through my notes. Hopefully, I can find it. I have way too many notes that I keep stored. All right. So it's not there. I'm gonna see if I can find it in one of my other outlines, because I do want to address this actually, because I do think it's important. So here's the thing, and I did find. So in some of my notes here, it does not authorize an offensive war, but it is typically used as a political cover, based off of some of the. If I can find my. I had an actual. I had my actual notations here because I don't have the Scott Horton mind trap where I can just remember this stuff. So the War Powers Resolution or War Powers Act is constantly misrepresented as it gives presidents a temporary right to wage war. It does not. And even beyond that, there is a strong argument that the resolution itself is constitutionally defective because it tries to regulate after the fact war making instead of preventing it in the front end. So it's one of those things that there's still a requirement where it does not allow you to go and make war, if that makes sense, right? Man, my notes are just absolutely terrible. I wish I could find where my actual I wish I could find where my where my full notes were on this because, well, I will write my, or I'll make sure to write it down in the portion below because I have to refer to my notes in order to make sure that I'm addressing it correctly. But let's see. War Powers Resolution: the 60-day clock is not permission, and filing a report does not make a war constitutional. Both parties essentially, like you have this whole thing to where both parties have tried to justify using it that way, but it's not this catch-all thing to where the War Powers Act or the War Powers Resolution, it's not granting permission. You have to. It does not authorize an offensive war. So you have a situation to where it's so heavily misquoted. I'll have to go back and I'll have to find it because I feel like it definitely requires me to have to kind of spell it out. So I'll do my due diligence and I will find it for you guys. And I'll put it in the description below, but it does not overwhelmingly just allow the president to do whatever the president wants to do. I feel like the billionaires have taken over America and making our troops fight for them. Smedley Butler always said that war was a racket. So there may be some truth to that. You've never seen anybody from Congress or anybody from the administration say, hey, you know what, like, my child will be the first to go. Congress does nothing but hand off the responsibility, vote for their own pay raises, and give away our warnings. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Obviously, a petrodollar is at risk. They don't want to lose that nixing. Got it for him after he crashed gold standard. I think I have an idea where you're talking about. The petrodollar it's when we started getting away from the gold standard, I think that's when we really started heading down a real path of destruction, unfortunately. Situation where more people would be paying attention to it, but they're not. Pretty soon they'll have to. Yeah, and so this is something that I did remark before. I think it's going to get to a situation where people are going to have to end up paying attention. And there's a follow-up point that Kenneth made there where, the dollar is going to be lost if they don't fight this war. And to some degree, I think a lot of that comes with the control aspect of it. Gas prices are unaffordable and self-inflicted by our leadership. Absolutely. Yep. I totally agree. I think you're going to see the price of goods. I think you're going to see the cost of things definitely continue taking that trend. A lot of people have this idea, I think, within the administration that this thing's going to be wrapped up soon. I don't see it, man. I don't see it with the current heading that we're going through. I'm not convinced that we're going to necessarily see that. And, so I think we're going to have to buckle down. And boy, I hope people have some type of, I don't know, man, maybe have some food stores, maybe have a few things set aside just in case, because if it continues to get any worse than this and we continue to see the rising price of fuel, that's going to affect everything else. It's going to affect everything else, including shipping for like foods and goods and all of that type of stuff. So I wouldn't expect it to necessarily get any lower. Again, I don't have a way to see in the future, but with the current state of things, I think we're going to see it get worse. And as many people have pointed out, there's this prevailing idea that even if you did get somehow, things to kind of go back. Well, Iran says it'll never go back to normal, but if you did kind of get some type of normalcy, the markets don't just reset. I don't think people fundamentally realize that the markets don't just reset. So we're going to face the ramifications, I think, of the Strait of Hormuz being very, very heavily regulated at this point, and who can and can't go through. Again, Iran is allowing some ships to go through. It's not closed. There's deals being made with Iran. And additionally, you're seeing things being done in Chinese yuan. So there's not even right now anything really being done with the dollar. And it's by selective allowance that these ships are able to go through to do their business, et cetera, et cetera. So, that in and of itself may provide like some type of stability, but I wouldn't be super assured about that. So these are just a few things I wanted to talk about tonight. I hope you guys and gals were able to get something out of it. I tried to do the best I can to stay up on this. Some weeks are better, some weeks, a little bit rocky. But as soon as I continue to get more updates on the Iran thing, and as far as updates here at home, I will try to include them to the best of my ability in the next show next week. I think I'm going to be going back to doing Thursdays again pretty regularly. So just kind of buckle down and be ready for 2 shows a week on a regular basis. So thank you guys and gals for coming and watching the show this evening. I apologize I couldn't find the entirety of my notes pertaining to the War Powers resolution, but I will find that, and I will do my best to try and get that down into the comments down below, so you guys and gals are able to go and take a look at that. So you can have something to reference towards that. But it's not just a carte blanche. You can get away with anything. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. So thank you again. Always appreciate everybody who comes out to support the show. And we will see you all next week on the Sentinels of Liberty podcast. Thanks again.